My name is Cynthia Garcia. I'm 28 years old, and for the last 3 years I lived my life in orbit around a man who swore he was headed for the stars. His name was Augustine, and he wanted nothing more than to escape gravity, escape me, as I would later find out. For 3 years, my world revolved around him. I was steady, predictable, a junior data analyst at a mid-sized firm clocking in 9 to 5, never missing a deadline, never breaking a promise. Augustine was the opposite. He was brilliant, restless, and consumed by his dream of getting into one of the most prestigious graduate programs in the country. We built our rhythm around that dream. I worked, he studied. I covered rent when his tutoring money came up short. I cooked, I cleaned, I researched the strongest coffee beans to keep him awake through his all-nighters. I was the safety net he never asked for, but always used. I thought it was love. Looking back, maybe it was devotion or delusion. The night it ended, I remember exactly what I cooked, a slow-simmered beef stew, his favorite. The aroma filled our small apartment, wrapping me in warmth that I mistook for security. Augustine sat hunched over his laptop on the couch, the bluish glow painting his face like a ghost. His brows furrowed, his lips pressed in a thin line. To anyone else it would have looked like focus. To me, it was just Augustine in his natural state, lost in a world where I was a footnote. I hummed softly as I portioned leftovers into containers, trying to fight off the creeping exhaustion of another long workday. My mind wandered toward the future, the one I thought we were building together. 2 weeks earlier, his acceptance letter had arrived, a fat envelope with ivy-covered buildings smiling up from glossy photos. He'd screamed when he opened it. I had screamed too. We drank the bottle of champagne I'd been saving for a someday milestone. I thought that milestone was ours. I imagined us solving the logistics together long distance for a while. Maybe a job transfer. Maybe I'd move later. None of it mattered as long as we were a team. I placed the stew in the fridge and walked to the couch. I bent down and pressed a kiss to the crown of his head. "Don't work too late," I murmured. He didn't look up. His voice was flat, rehearsed. "Cynthia, we need to talk about my future. Our future as you see it." A cold knot formed in my stomach. The hum in my chest stopped. His words weren't an invitation, they were a verdict waiting to be read. I sank onto the couch beside him, the scent of stew still on my hands. My heart beat unevenly, searching for a rhythm in the silence. Augustine closed his laptop and set it aside. His posture was casual, too casual. Fingers interlaced in his lap like a CEO about to fire an employee. His eyes, though, carried the steel of finality. "You've been amazing, Cynthia." He began, his tone almost clinical. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You know that, right?" I nodded stiffly. My lips tried to curl into a smile, but it trembled. Here it comes, I thought. Some confession about another woman, some secret I hadn't seen. Secret. But no, his betrayal was colder, sharper than infidelity. "This program, it's the biggest opportunity of my life," he said, staring past me at a future that no longer had my shadow in it. "And I can't be held back by someone who's comfortable with just stability, with a 9-to-5 job and a quiet life." The words sliced clean through me. "I wasn't holding you back, Augustine. I was supporting you. I've been the one paying for everything so you could focus on this." He flinched just slightly, then smoothed his expression into a placid mask. "That's exactly the problem. It's too comfortable. I need to be challenged. I need to constantly fight to keep up. Not live in a life where things are just handed to me." I swallowed hard, my voice a whisper. "Are you calling me a handout?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I'm saying, you're a weight on my future. It's not fair to either of us. I need independence to prove I can do this on my own. I can't take you with me. Not now, maybe not ever." The silence roared in my ears. His logic twisted itself into a noble mask, framing his selfishness as sacrifice. He cast himself as the martyr and me as the anchor he had to cut loose. I rose slowly, my hands numb. I walked to the bedroom, the stew's warm scent now mocking me. I pulled a suitcase from the closet and began packing. Behind me, Augustine stayed seated, watching silent, not pleading, not even regretful. I zipped the suitcase, turned to face him. My voice was flat, stripped of tears. "So what you're saying is, this is it?" "Yes." His answer came quickly. Too quickly. "I'm sorry, but this is what I need. A clean break. No ties. I need to be free." I nodded once. Just once. A gesture final as a slammed door. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't demand an explanation. I simply packed a duffel bag with essentials and walked to the door. The stew still simmered faintly in the air, a cruel reminder of the home I thought we'd shared. Hand on the doorknob, I turned back. He looked small in that moment, smaller than I had ever seen him. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Augustine," I said softly. It was the last thing I ever said to him in that apartment. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the silence on both sides. And for the first time in 3 years, the silence was mine alone. The first week after I left Agustin felt like walking through fog. I found a one-bedroom apartment on the opposite side of the city. Cheap, barely furnished its walls, stained with years of other tenants' loneliness. The place had no sunlight, no kitchen island, no laughter echoing in its corners. Just 4 walls, a sagging mattress, and a silence so heavy it felt alive. Every day was the same. Wake up, go to work, pretend to function, go home, stare at nothing. At the office, my coworkers' voices blurred into background noise. Their jokes, their weekend plans, their small talk, all of it washed over me like static. I typed my reports, hit my deadlines, and smiled at the right times. But inside, I was hollow. At night, I'd come home to the apartment's emptiness. Sometimes I'd order takeout just to hear another human voice, even if it was just a delivery driver asking me to sign a receipt. Friends texted me, called me, tried to drag me out. I brushed them off with vague excuses. I'm just tired, busy with work, next week maybe. The truth, I was ashamed. Ashamed of how completely I had built my life around Augustin. Ashamed that when he cut me loose, I didn't know who I was without him. One evening, while unpacking boxes I had shoved into a corner, I stumbled on something I hadn't seen in years, a battered leather notebook. My handwriting spilled across the pages sketches of an app interface, flowcharts, lists of ideas I'd once believed in. My old dream. Before Augustin, before his ambitions consumed our lives, I'd wanted to build a startup, a niche lifestyle tech platform that combined habit tracking with community support. I'd believed it could help people help me even become better versions of themselves. I traced my finger over the sketches, the ink smudged from years of neglect. A tiny fire stirred in my chest, fragile but real. And then his voice returned sharp as glass. "Cynthia, you're not seriously wasting time on that, are you?" Augustin's laugh from 2 years ago echoed in my memory. We'd been at a dinner party with his grad school friends. My notebook had been on the coffee table. He'd picked it up, flipped through it, and with a smirk held it out like a prop. "Look at this Cynthia's cute little app idea. She thinks she's going to be the next Steve Jobs." His friends laughed politely, awkwardly. I wanted to shrink into the floor. Augustin didn't notice or didn't care. He kept going. "She's a data analyst. She should stick to spreadsheets. Leave the big ideas to people who actually dream big." I'd smiled that night, my cheeks burning, my chest collapsing inwards. Later, when I tried to bring it up, he brushed it off. "Babe, I was joking. Don't be so sensitive. You know I love you." But love doesn't humiliate you in front of strangers. I snapped the notebook shut. My hands trembled not with sadness, but with something sharper, anger, not just at him, but at myself, at how easily I had abandoned my own ambitions to fuel his. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat cross-legged on the floor, notebook, open pen in hand. For hours, I filled page after page with updates, revisions, new ideas. By 3 a.m., my apartment was littered with Post-its and crumpled paper. For the first time since leaving Augustin, the silence didn't suffocate me. It held me, protected me. The next days blurred into a rhythm. I went to work as usual, but when I came home, I transformed. My old laptop hummed as I relearned coding basics. I sketched prototypes on index cards. I scoured online forums for startup advice. Hours passed without me noticing. The takeout boxes piled up again, but this time it wasn't out of apathy. It was because I was too absorbed to care. I wasn't doing this for Augustin, not to prove him wrong, not even for revenge. I was doing this for me, to reclaim the pieces of myself I'd abandoned in his shadow. Still, loneliness crept in. Some nights, the silence stretched too wide and my pen stalled. The temptation to scroll through his social media accounts burned in me. But I resisted. I couldn't risk reopening wounds. Instead, I forced myself out of the apartment once a week. I found a local women in tech meetup. At first, I sat in the back quiet, convinced I didn't belong. But gradually, I began speaking, sharing my idea. And when I did, something unexpected happened. People listened. Really listened. One woman, a UX designer named Leah, leaned in, her eyes bright. "That's actually a fantastic concept. Have you thought about how to monetize it?" I blinked, stunned. No one's ever asked me that before. Leah smiled. Well, maybe you've been showing it to the wrong people. That night, walking back to my apartment under flickering streetlights, I felt lighter than I had in years. Augustine's words still haunted me. You're a weight on my future. But maybe he was right in a way he hadn't intended. Maybe I was a weight because I'd been weighing myself down by carrying someone else's dreams instead of my own. And now finally I was ready to put them down. The weeks that followed blurred into a new kind of rhythm. By day, I was still the dependable Cynthia Garcia, quiet, efficient, and invisible in my cubicle at the data analytics firm. But by night, I became someone else, a version of myself I thought I'd buried years ago. I'd toss my work blazer onto the couch, kick off my heels, and trade Excel spreadsheets for lines of code. My apartment transformed into something alive, sticky notes plastered across the walls, scraps of paper covering the kitchen counter, my laptop glowing in the darkness like a heartbeat. I stopped buying groceries in bulk. It felt pointless. Instead, takeout containers stacked up on the counter, colorful badges of late-night progress. Sleep became optional. 2 hours one night, 4 the next. I didn't care. The exhaustion didn't weigh me down, it lifted me. For the first time in years, I wasn't orbiting anyone else's life. I was building my own. Still, the loneliness lingered. It crept in at odd moments when I brushed my teeth and realized there was no toothbrush beside mine, or when I cooked a simple meal and caught myself plating it for two out of habit. Augustine's absence was everywhere, in the silence of the apartment, in the ache in my chest when I remembered his laugh, or the way he used to stroke my hair absent-mindedly while reading. But every time the ache rose, I reminded myself of the dinner party humiliation of the night he'd told me I was a weight. That memory became my shield, my reminder not to cave to nostalgia. I unfollowed him on social media, deleted old photos, stopped responding to mutual friends who only called to update me on how well Augustine was doing. Let them think he was thriving. I didn't need to know. One night, after hours of debugging a prototype, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the mess of sticky notes. Half-finished flowcharts sketched wireframes, bold arrows pointing to the words habit, community, growth. I remembered something Augustine once told me when I'd tried to explain my app idea to him. People don't want accountability, Cynthia. They want convenience. Your idea is cute, but it's not serious. You're not serious. The bitterness in his voice had cut me back then, but now those words became fuel. Every keystroke, every diagram, every late-night breakthrough was my rebuttal. Cute little app idea. Watch me. The Women in Tech meetup became my anchor. Every Tuesday night, I sat among strangers, turned allies, who nodded as I spoke, challenged me with questions, and reminded me that I wasn't alone in this. Leah, the UX designer, became a friend. She had a quick wit and a soft laugh that made everything feel lighter. Sometimes after meetups, we'd grab coffee and she'd help me refine user flows. Don't overcomplicate it, she told me one night, sketching on a napkin. Keep it clean. If your app makes people feel overwhelmed, they won't come back. Her confidence rubbed off on me each time she looked me in the eye and said, "This is good, Cynthia. Really good." I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years, belief. The irony wasn't lost on me. Augustine had spent years pushing me aside to chase his dream. And here I was, finally chasing mine, not to compete with him, not to outshine him, but because I finally remembered how to belong to myself. Months passed. My prototype became a beta version. I tested it with the women in the group, gathering feedback, fixing bugs. Slowly, users began trickling in, friends of friends, strangers online. The first time I saw a stranger sign up, my heart pounded like I'd won the lottery. The app didn't make money yet, but it was alive, breathing, real. Meanwhile, at work, I earned a small promotion. My manager praised my dedication without realizing my real dedication was waiting at home in my laptop. With the raise, I moved into a slightly bigger apartment, nothing fancy, but brighter, cleaner mine. For the first time since leaving Augustine, I wasn't surviving. I was living. Still, the shadows lingered. Some nights when exhaustion hit hard, I'd dream of him. Dreams where he apologized, where he held me and said he was wrong. I'd wake up with my pillow damp from tears I didn't want to admit I'd shed. But each morning, I sat back at my desk, reopened my laptop, and reminded myself the future I was building had no space for the past. Then, one evening after a meetup, Leah turned to me and said something I wasn't ready for. "You know, Cynthia," she said, tucking her hair behind her ear, "you're kind of inspiring." I laughed, nearly choking on my coffee. Me inspiring. I've been living on noodles and cold brew for weeks. I'm serious, she said. Most people would have crumbled after what you went through. You didn't just survive, you built something. That takes guts. Her words lodged in my chest, warm and heavy. For so long, I'd believed Augustine's version of me, the stable, boring one, the handout, the weight. Hearing Leah call me inspiring felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Walking home that night, the city lights flickering above me, I realized something. For months, I'd thought I was working in spite of Augustine, that I was fueled by proving him wrong. But the truth was simpler, scarier. I wasn't building my startup because of him. I was building it because deep down I'd always wanted to. I just needed to remember. And for the first time, I whispered it to myself out loud into the night air. I can do this. I really can. The words didn't sound fragile anymore. They sounded true. A year passed before I realized how different my life had become. The girl who once cried into a takeout box on the floor was gone. In her place stood a woman with structure goals and something she could call her own. The app I'd been building, my cute little hobby, as Augustine once sneered, was no longer just code on a laptop. It was in beta testing with hundreds of users. People I'd never met were writing me emails saying it helped them stay accountable, helped them feel less alone. Each message lit something in me, a reminder that my work mattered. I wasn't rich, I wasn't famous, but I was free. I'd also moved into a new apartment, a little bigger, a little brighter, with a window that caught the morning sun. It wasn't much, but every corner carried the stamp of me. A soft rug I picked out. A plant that somehow wasn't dying. A second-hand desk where I coded until dawn. Even my job at the firm felt different. I'd been promoted to project lead on a mid-size account. My manager praised my initiative. They had no idea that my true initiative bloomed after hours. I was still tired most of the time, but it wasn't the bone-deep, soul-crushing tiredness I'd felt when I was orbiting Augustine. This was different. This was the kind of exhaustion that came with purpose. But purpose couldn't erase shadows. Augustine rarely crossed my mind anymore. When he did, it was like remembering a book I'd read years ago, one that had left me with more questions than answers. I told myself I didn't care, that he was gone, irrelevant. Then, one evening, an email popped up from an old college friend we'd both known, Eric. The subject line read simply, "Long time Cynthia." I clicked it, smiling faintly at the nostalgia. His note was casual. At first, he'd dropped out of the same program Augustine had gotten into. He was back in the city, catching up with people, and wanted to see how I was doing. And then, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned Augustine. Grad school was brutal, total pressure cooker. Augustine's not doing great. He's isolated, buried in debt, burned out. Honestly, he's a ghost of himself. Rumor is he's thinking of dropping out. I feel kind of bad for him, but also, not really. Anyway, hope you're doing better than he is. I read the lines 3 times. A strange heaviness settled in my chest. He'd thrown me away for independence, for freedom, for a future he claimed I was holding him back from. And now that same freedom had become his prison. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant, even smug. Instead, I felt nothing. Not anger, not sympathy, just emptiness. That night, I sat by the window of my apartment, the city buzzing faintly outside, and thought about how different our paths had become. He'd wanted me gone so he could soar. Instead, he'd crashed. Meanwhile, I, the weight, was slowly learning how to fly. It wasn't fair. It wasn't just. But life had never cared about those words. Weeks passed, and I buried myself deeper in my work. The app grew steadily. Users multiplied. A small stream of revenue began to trickle in. Enough to cover some bills, enough to prove it wasn't just a dream. At meetups, Leah cheered every update. "See? Told you this was real," she said one night, grinning across her latte. I laughed, embarrassed. "I know, but it still feels like I'm waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, 'Cynthia, this isn't for you. Go back to being safe.'" Leah shook her head. "That's just his voice still in your head, not yours." Her words stung because they were true. Despite my progress, Augustine's ghost haunted me in small ways. In moments of doubt, I still heard him. "You're not serious." When bugs broke my code, I imagined his smirk. "See, I told you it wasn't practical." But every time those voices rose, I reminded myself of the real voices that mattered. The users who wrote thank you notes. Leah's encouragement. My own whispered affirmation, I can do this. Then one evening, just as I was beginning to believe in the stability I'd built, another shadow fell across my new life. A message slipped into my inbox. Not from Eric this time, from an unknown sender. The subject line, "Hey stranger." I hovered over the email, my heartbeat quickening. I already knew who it was. Against my better judgment, I clicked. It was short, too casual. Hey, Cynthia, it's been a long time. Just saw something that reminded me of you. How have you been? No name, but it didn't need one. The entitlement in the tone was unmistakable. Agustin. I closed the laptop, heart pounding. It had been over a year. He had no right to step back into my life like it was still his to claim. I didn't respond. Didn't even type a draft. I simply blocked the address, shut the computer, and tried to sleep. But as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unease spread through me. I had a sinking feeling this wasn't the last time I'd hear from him. The first email I ignored. The second came a week later from a different address. The subject line, please, just one chance. I didn't open it. By the third attempt, I had filters set up. My inbox sent anything from him straight into junk. Out of sight, out of mind, or so, I told myself. But even without reading the words, just seeing his name appear even briefly was enough to twist my stomach into knots. It felt like someone slipping notes under a locked door. I wasn't answering, but the intrusion was constant, insistent. Then came the text messages. Unknown number. Cynthia. I know you probably hate me. I don't blame you, but I'm not okay. Please, can we just talk? I stared at the screen, my hand trembling. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, temptation prickling to lash out to remind him what he'd said the night I left, to ask if this, his collapse, was what freedom had bought him. But I didn't type a word. I blocked the number and set the phone down face first on the table. The next message came from another number. This one longer, rambling. I made a huge mistake. Grad school wasn't what I thought it would be. I lost my scholarship. I'm drowning in debt. I thought independence would make me stronger, but it just broke me. I miss us. I miss you. I'd give anything to go back. His words crawled across the screen, heavy with desperation. He painted his suffering in vivid strokes, the sleepless nights, the failed classes, the friends who'd abandoned him. He ended with, I'll even help you with your little project. Please just let me in again. The phrase caught me. Little project. Even in his desperation, he couldn't resist diminishing me. The words didn't sting the way they once might have. This time they made me laugh, low, humorless, bitter. My little project was now supporting hundreds of active users. It was more alive than he realized, and unlike him, it was growing. That night, I sat by my window again, the city lights winking below. My phone buzzed on the desk, another number, another message waiting. I didn't open it. Instead, I whispered to myself as if reminding a stubborn shadow he chose his freedom. I chose mine. But the shadow didn't let go. A mutual friend, one of the few I hadn't cut off, called me out of the blue. His voice was uneasy. Cynthia, listen. Agustin's been asking around. He wants your number. He says he's sorry that he needs to talk to you. He sounds bad. Did you give it to him? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Of course not, but he keeps pushing. It's honestly kind of weird. He won't let it go. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Then tell him this: if he doesn't stop, you'll cut him off too. There was silence on the line. Then my friend said quietly, You've really changed, Cynthia. Good, I replied before ending the call. For days, I told myself the storm would pass, that he'd eventually give up. But instead, the messages escalated. Desperate emails slipped through spam filters, each one longer than the last, dripping with regret and pleas. One email was almost a confession. I thought pushing you away would make me stronger, but all it did was prove how weak I really am. I gave up the best thing in my life for nothing. Please, I can't do this alone anymore. I read it once, then deleted it. I refused to let his downfall become my responsibility. Still late at night, the weight of his words pressed on me. I'd lie awake, staring at the cracks in my ceiling, torn between the woman I was becoming and the woman I used to be. The old Cynthia, the one who cooked, cleaned, and paid the bills, while he chased dreams, would have rushed to his side, would have soothed his wounds, carried his burden, sacrificed herself again. But that Cynthia was gone. This Cynthia knew better. The final message arrived on a rainy Friday. My phone buzzed against the desk. Another unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something the length of the message preview maybe made me open it. It was pages long. Agustin spilled everything. The collapse of his scholarship, the debt collectors, the family who'd turned their backs on him, the professors who told him he wasn't cut out for the program. And at the very end, I can't believe I gave up the best thing in my life for nothing. Please, Cynthia, I'll do anything. Just don't leave me alone in this. The words blurred before my eyes. Not because I was crying, I wasn't, but because I finally understood what his messages were really saying. It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about regret. It was about survival. He wasn't reaching for me because he wanted me. He was reaching because he was drowning, and I was the only solid thing he remembered. But I wasn't a lifeline anymore. I was the shore he'd chosen to swim away from. And I wasn't swimming back. I set the phone down, let the rain patter against the window, and instead of answering him, I turned back to my laptop. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting. My world, my work, my future. Without another thought, I began to type. The rain had finally cleared the city air, leaving the streets washed and gleaming. That morning, I put on my best coat, the tailored navy one I'd bought after my promotion, and walked into a downtown cafe with a steady heart. I wasn't there for coffee. I was there for a signature. My lawyer was already waiting in a corner booth, a stack of papers neatly clipped together. The incorporation papers, the final step that would make my startup a legitimate company. The smell of roasted beans wrapped around us as I slid into the seat, pen in hand. For once, the future didn't feel abstract. It felt like ink about to meet paper. We were halfway through reviewing the documents when the bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up at first, but then a ripple of silence passed through the room, and something a shift in the air, an instinct made me glance toward the entrance. And there he was, Agustin. But not the Agustin I remembered. Not the restless, ambitious man who had once dismissed me with icy finality. This Agustin was thinner, paler, shoulders hunched beneath a threadbare trench coat. His hair was unkempt, his eyes darting nervously around the cafe, like a fugitive searching for shelter. His bag looked overstuffed, as if he carried his entire life inside it. The sight punched the air from my lungs. For a moment I froze. I wasn't prepared for this. Not here, not now. His eyes swept the cafe unfocused at first. Then they landed on me. He stopped dead in his tracks. For several seconds, neither of us moved. His face drained of color. He looked from me, to the lawyer, to the open laptop on the table, back to me. Recognition slammed into him, dragging disbelief behind it. He walked over slowly, hesitantly, as if approaching a fragile animal. Cynthia, his voice cracked. I nodded once, keeping my expression calm, unreadable. I can't believe it's you, he whispered. His eyes flicked over me. My coat, my polished shoes, the documents spread before me. You look different, successful. The word hung awkwardly between us, weighted with shame. This is my lawyer, I said evenly, gesturing to the man beside me. We're finalizing some paperwork. Agustin's gaze dropped to the documents. His throat bobbed. He tried for a smile, but it faltered. I was just here to meet with a loan officer, he admitted, his voice trembling. I'm trying to renegotiate my student debt. The irony cut through the air like glass. Me, pen poised to sign incorporation papers for a growing business. Him begging for mercy from a system he thought he could conquer alone. His composure cracked. Cynthia, please. His words tangled in his throat, spilling out clumsily. I was a fool. I gave up the best thing I ever had for nothing. I thought I needed freedom, but all I did was destroy myself. Please, I need you. I can help with your little app thing. I'll do anything. Just take me back. The words hung between us, desperate and raw. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. A year ago, those words might have shattered me, might have made me ache to comfort him, to forgive him, but now they only confirmed what I already knew: he hadn't changed. He still didn't see me, not really. Even in his desperation, he called it my little app thing. Funny, I said softly, my voice steady. You once told me I was a weight on your future, but what you didn't realize is that you were a chain on mine. His face crumpled. He opened his mouth to argue, to plead again, but I raised my hand. Letting you go was the best decision I ever made, I continued, because it forced me to take myself seriously. It forced me to build something that you would have always seen as small as beneath you. But it isn't small, Agustin. Not anymore. Tears brimmed in his eyes. Please, Cynthia. I've been so alone. I don't know what else to do. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw Agustin not as the towering ambition I once admired, but as a man stripped bare, desperate, broken, lost. And I felt nothing. No anger, no triumph, just peace. You needed to be free, I said quietly. And you were right, I was holding you back. But it turns out I needed to be free too. And I am. I don't hate you, but I don't need you either. The words were calm, final. I turned back to my lawyer, picked up the pen, and signed my name on the dotted line. When I looked up again, Agustin was gone. The space where he had stood was empty, just as empty as the life I once thought I needed him to fill. Outside, the city sparkled under the washed clean sky. I stepped out of the cafe papers in my bag and breathed deeply. The air tasted like rain and new beginnings. For the first time, the silence inside me wasn't heavy. It was freedom. When I stepped out of the cafe, the city felt different. The rain had rinsed everything clean. The pavement glistened, lights reflected like fractured diamonds, and the air tasted sharp with the scent of ozone. I tightened my coat around me and stood there for a moment, letting the cool air rush into my lungs. Agustin was gone. The man who had once defined the edges of my life, who had been my sun and my storm, had walked out of that cafe without a backward glance. Or maybe he had glanced back, maybe I just hadn't cared enough to notice. What mattered was this. For the first time in years, the silence around me was not heavy. It was expansive. It was mine. I walked home slowly, papers tucked safely in my bag, each step steady as if my body had finally found its rhythm again. I should have been shaking. Should have been replaying the encounter in my mind. But I wasn't. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was peaceful. Closure, I realized, wasn't loud. It didn't always come with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it was as simple as a signature on a dotted line, as quiet as watching someone walk away and not needing to follow. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window of my apartment, the one I had chosen, the one filled with my things, my work, my presence. The city stretched out before me, alive and humming. I thought back to the woman I had been a year and a half ago, quietly spooning stew into containers while a man rehearsed the words to cut me loose. I remembered the hollow apartment I moved into, the tears, the shame, the silence. And then I looked at the walls around me now, covered in sketches, notes, sticky reminders of deadlines. A home built not around someone else's ambition, but around my own. I whispered into the night, almost a prayer, almost a vow. Sometimes the greatest gift someone gives you is leaving, because in their absence, you finally hear your own voice. And I smiled, because I had. Just as I was about to close my laptop, a notification pinged in the corner of the screen. A new email. For a split second, my chest tightened. Reflex, fear. Another desperate plea from Augustine, another intrusion. But when I opened it, my breath caught. It wasn't from him. It was from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, Potential Investment Opportunity. I clicked, heart racing. The message was short, professional, but thrilling. Ms. Garcia, I came across your beta platform through a mutual contact. I believe your work has strong potential. I'd like to set up a call to discuss funding options. Please let me know your availability. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling not with dread, but with anticipation. I thought of Augustine's words echoing from a past that no longer owned me, your little app thing. I almost laughed, because here it was not little at all. Not a hobby, not a joke, not a weight. It was my future. I closed the laptop, gently set the wine glass aside, and leaned back in my chair. My heart was still pounding, but it wasn't fear.